Right now, I am thrilled and honored to present like one of the coolest people you will ever meet. Okay, and I want to read his bio, so I'm going to pull up my email so I don't screw this up. Um, but I'm going to introduce you to Tim. And Tim was diagnosed with Asperger's at 54. And Tim Goldstein is a global trainer for a major tech company. Hello, he works for Google. He's a neurodiverse communication specialist and a Roger Love method vocal coach. He trains all employees, neurotypical and neurodistinct, how each function and strategies to communicate. And he has deep experience in business and consulting. Tim helps companies recognize and overcome the challenges to excelling the neurodistinct phase. Using his neurocloud concept, he explains the spotlight logical approach common among many autistics. Tim has lectured on concepts at Cornell, Vanderbilt, major global companies, and coached privately. He's on the board of the Autism Society of America. His book, Geek's Guide to Interviews, 15 Critical Items for the Technical Type, helped better understand the challenges that the autistics face in joining the workforce. So, I mean, when I tell you this guy will understand everyone, he gets it, and whether you're neurodiverse or not, the tips that Tim will provide will be awesome. And I am very happy and proud to introduce you formally to Tim Goldstein.
Well, thank you very much. What can I say? That is a nicely crafted bio.
Thank you for that.
Well, it was actually written by a professional writer, to be honest with you. And that's kind of an interesting point is, when you're doing your resumes and such, there are people who specialize in doing those things and can make your presentation of how they see you much, much better. So, trust them. When they say, no, that's too much stuff or whatever, just believe them. That's what they do. We tend to want to say too much and tell way too much. The reality is my bio could be, well, I'm 62 now. I've been working since I was 16. I've had 3 or 4 or 5 of my own companies along the way. So my bio could be half an hour long, but how many of you would want to hear that? The answer is you don't want to hear that much about it. So that will actually be a point that I'm going to talk about. So what I'm going to really be covering, I guess let me share my screen here. Bear with me. I can't do 2 things at one time. Executive function challenge. Took me a lot of years to recognize that I'm not very good at 2 things at one time. Okay, so you should see a nice looking little slide there about a great session for all of you. So what I'm really going to be covering is a bunch of things about actually interviewing and some tips to go about interviewing. And then at the end, I'm going to kind of cover some ideas about how to approach getting into an IT career. And they might be a little different than you've heard, but they've been steps that I've seen that have worked quite well. And then at the end, I actually have a little bit of a surprise, which is I'm going to introduce you, not like physically. I'm going to show you their slides and tell you about them, but they already know about your program, for a recruiter who actually specializes in people who do have special needs. And she's been in the autism at work arena for probably 15 years now, has had 2 of her own companies. She was a president of Autocon USA. So she's quite experienced in, what it takes to get people into the job market. So we'll be talking more about that when we get to the end. So, obviously, basic banner slide just to get us started. We're really going to be talking about getting employed for the neurodistinct. And in case none of you have ever heard the term neurodistinct, it's a terminology that I use because I don't like the term neurodivergent. To me, neurodivergent, and I'll be talking more about this concept of what I refer to as the emotional life of words, which means that words have connotations that have nothing to do with the actual meaning of the word. And to me, neurodivergent has nothing but negative connotations. If you don't know what it means, it sounds like somebody's talking down to you. And if you try and figure it out, it's diverging, separating, different. It's like negative kind of sounding things. Whereas I came up with the term neurodistinct. It took a long while because it had to say ND, because we always talk about NT and ND, neurotypicals and in my case, distincts. So it took a long while to come up with the right term that had those that could use those initials. And finally, I came up with neurodistinct, because when you think about it, what is different about us compared to the general neurotypical population? And what's different is we perceive, process, and think in a totally different manner, in a distinctly different manner than the rest of the world. So it's self-defining. And the other thing is, who doesn't want to be distinct? I think we all want to be distinct and known for something that we're good at. So I think this presents us in a much better light than saying neurodivergent, which doesn't make us sound, very appealing. It's kind of like saying here, there's, Brussels sprouts for dinner tonight. Yeah. So at any rate, we will dive into really understanding what's important to the employer and how to use the fact that you now have the knowledge of what is important to them. And just by the way, if you see me looking down here, it's not that I'm not paying attention to you. The camera is up there that is actually, shooting. But the meet screen is down here below the camera. So when I'm looking down, I'm merely looking at the screen where I can actually see you. And I will try to, make myself look in the camera like I should be. But it's really nice to see what, see you at the same time. So if I do look down again, not ignoring you, just, watching the show as we go. So first question here, and you can either, just, shoot it, shout it out. Question here. And again, you can either drop it into the chat or just, say it out loud. What do you see in this picture? Yes, we have a horse and a river. So we have both now. Daniel had the horse side, and the other two of you had the frog. So if you basically tip your head 45 degrees to the right, and it's easy to see the frog. It's in the yellow area. And tip 45 degrees to the left, and the frog is the face of the horse, and I don't know, what would you call it? Grass or whatever that's in the river is the mane of the horse. Now I see. So what's the point of showing this to you? Why do I use this slide? Well, the reason I use the slide is to really just establish, which we all know, but hey, it's always great to confirm it, that we're looking at the identical image at the identical time, exact same information, but we got different answers. And that's normal. And that's something that you need to remember when you go into interviewing and when you start talking with employers, is just because you perceive it one way doesn't mean that's how it's going to be seen by them. If you think about this, if, this was the job ad and it, we're stretching it a little bit as a picture and we're trying to turn it into words, but, if this was a job ad and what you saw out of it was they wanted frogs, so you went in and talked about frog type things. But the reality is they wanted horses. What's the possibility you think you're going to get that position? The answer was you're talking totally about the wrong things that they want to know about. So that's just something that is going to be important to remember. Is we'll cover a little bit of what is important to the employer, and that is what's important. What's important to you doesn't matter, to be honest with you. Because you're not the one that's making the hiring decision. Now, it may be, important to know some of those things to decide to take the position, but, you don't have to worry about that till they make the offer. So at any rate, just, seeing is believing, so is hearing is believing, and they're going to get out of the interview what they, perceive based on the way they're looking at the interview, and, vice versa. You're going to get out of it perceived in the way you're looking at the interview. You just nailed it exactly. You have to have an open mind. That doesn't mean you have to believe in all the different versions. You just have to have an open mind. To some people, that's the way it is. And if that's the way it is to them, that's the way it is. And you've got to deal with it as if that was real, even though to you, it may not be. This is one of the first things that, you need to really understand when you go into interviewing. And this even goes into crafting your resume, to be honest with you. And what we're really trying to say here is, you're all getting certified. You're going to, walk out with, some nice Google certs that you have some, real skills in the IT world. So what tends to happen is techs tend to emphasize their tech skills. Before I wrote my book, I went and sat down with a bunch of tech geeks that I worked with for a year or so and asked them, what is your biggest challenge when you go to interview? And I don't think there was 3 people. 2 of them I know were not autistic. One, it was before I was diagnosed, so I don't know. I'm kind of going by memory. I think one may have been autistic, probably. But they all agreed with what their biggest challenge was. And what they thought their biggest challenge was explaining how technical they were, how skilled they were. And these were very experienced, gentlemen who had been in the IT industry for, 15, 20 years. So they're all focusing on the tech. Well, when you look at this picture, the tech is that yellow box up there. And all those other boxes, which, I'm not sure if you can read them or not. I mean, it says things like emotional intelligence and team fit and company culture fit and project experience and soft skills. And, the big point though here is you can see there's a huge amount of other things that they're considering in the interview and not just your tech. Normally in a tech interview process, you're going to get interviewed by somebody for what at Google we call RRK, role-related knowledge. And role-related knowledge is your tech skills. But that's only one part of the interview. The other parts of the interview have nothing to do with your tech skills. They have more to do with who you are, how you think, how you go about doing stuff. So important thing to remember is your skills will open the door because, hey, you've got the certification. They say, hey, this person must have the appropriate skills. They passed the cert test. But remember, there's a lot more that they want to know about. So don't just get hung up on, hey, I got a cert that makes me ready. You've also got to be able to, fit in with all those other questions and answer them in a way in which they feel that you would be a great fit for their organization. So big takeaway from this one is simply, you can see your tech skills are just a tiny part of what they're looking for when they're actually interviewing you. So you should give them about the amount of tech skill information that it is in the amount that they're asking you. And the worst thing you can do is, maybe you're going to have an HR person that's interviewing you. They don't know tech at all. Trying to convince the HR person how technical you are, they don't care. They're not even going to be able to judge how technical you are. They're trying to judge how you'll be as a culture fit. Are you going to be a problem to the company? Those kind of things. So, just think of it that way, that there's all these other pieces. Your tech, while it's important, is not all of that they're looking at when you go to interview. Emotions, instinct speaking. I am convinced, a lot of people don't think that we have instincts, but I'm convinced humans actually do have instincts. And I think the way that it speaks to us and it works is through emotions. It tells you that you should be scared, run, get excited, all those kind of things. But where that gets really important is down that little quote that's at the bottom. And what the quote's at the bottom is, saying, just, kind of paraphrasing it, is when an emotion is actually vocalized. So in other words, it's in the tonality and sound of their voice, that is accepted and understood far more strongly than the actual words of saying the words for the emotions. So in other words, saying that, I'm really excited about this job is not going to make them think that you're very excited about the job. I mean, you said the words, but the words came across in a way that had no emotion. And what they want to hear at that point is they want to hear some emotion like, you're excited about this job. And you don't have to be, as autistic individuals, we tend to not be, we'll say, really good at transmitting or receiving emotions. Tends to be a little bit of a hang up for a lot of us. But the trick is you don't have to learn, to tap into your emotions and your sensitive self. All you have to learn is how to sound like you're confident, how to sound like you're excited. Because if you can do the sound of excitement, nobody is going to know whether you're excited or not because you sound excited. And what is the sound of excitement? The sound of excitement is very simple. When you get excited, or we'll say when neurotypicals get excited. When us autistics get excited, we tend to just go faster and stay monotone anyways. But, when neurotypicals get excited, what they'll normally do is they'll go up in pitch a little bit and they'll put a lot of melody into their voice and they'll get a little bit louder. And they'll say, I am so excited that this would be the perfect job for me. I don't know, hopefully you could kind of hear in that there's excitement being transmitted in that. So that is one thing that, I would say you really work on. And that comes from my being a Roger Love vocal coach. Roger Love is the best vocal coach in the world. Used to be Michael Jackson's vocal coach, is Selena Gomez's vocal coach. He taught Tyra Banks how to speak when she moved from being a model to actually doing shows, things like that. He's the one who came up with this concept of really that you just need to learn to make the sounds of emotions. And that comes from the singing background because singers transmit emotions super well. And you can even hear an instrumental and get the emotions from it because it's in the sound, not in the words. So there's two really, sounds that I would say that are the winners to have in interviews. And one is just the sound of excited, happy. So we already covered that. You go up in pitch a little bit, make sure you have some melody in your voice. And melody is going up and down through some notes. Use more than one note and go just a little bit faster, not too fast, but just a little bit faster. And you'll come across as being really, really excited. So when you walk in and you first meet the interviewers, say, hey, I am so excited to be interviewing with you. I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So good. There's a good place to, leave some excitement. The other place to leave some excitement is at the end. You want to tell them very clearly that you are excited about this job and this company. Because when I went and interviewed all the different recruiters, the HR people, all those kind of people for how to go about, the question was really a person that has all the technical skills to get a role. What is it that they did that made them not get the role? And the answer was, and this was unanimous and it blew me away. I would not expect it. It was, they did not seem excited enough and interested enough in the job. So in other words, at the end of the interview, they didn't say, this role sounds like it would be so great for me. I'd love to be here. And this company is just amazing. So there you go. You put your excitement in at the end and you clearly tell them, even if you don't like the job, tell them that you like the job. What the heck? You can always turn down the job offer if you got another one, but, always want to tell them because that is a big deal that if you don't put that in there, then they tend not to hire you. And then the other one is grateful. And the sound of grateful is very simple. You slow down a little bit and you drop your voice down a little bit and you take out some melody. So you say, and thank you so much for taking this time to interview me. I really appreciate, you're taking a look at me as a potential employee. So you tell them, I want this job. I love this job. And thank you so much for. So that you're playing on neurotypical's emotions. But guess what? That's how marketing and sales works is you have to play on their emotions. So that's probably the best way that you can play on their emotions is just get down the ability to convey for at least a few words, excitement and gratitude. And with those two combinations, you now can set them up where they're going to say, oh, wow, they're emotionally intelligent. We might not be, but we sounded it. And you also hit the points that they're going to be looking for. What is this person like? Are they excited? Do they want to work here? Those kind of things. So how would you go about doing that? What you're really trying to do is you're trying to make them dream of you starting. You really want, when you walk out of the interview, you want those people sitting in that interview room to go, I couldn't wait till, so-and-so starts. This person was so amazing and so excited about the job. I just think, gosh, I can't wait till we can get them in here. That's your goal. You want to make them love you that much that they're just totally, bowled over that you will be the amazing person that they need. And the way you do that is you use the fewest number of words, but with the most emotion in them. So always remember, we tend to talk way too much as autistic individuals. That's something we really, really have to be careful about. We want to use the fewest words that have the most emotional content, because it's been proven the emotional content is going to override the words you say. So you want to get that emotion in there, that you're excited, that, that was an interesting opportunity, whatever it is. So that's something to definitely be aiming for. Another thing is, how do you go about answering questions? You're obviously in an interview, they're going to ask you questions. And, the first thing is we're going to talk just a little bit about how do you go about answering them? Well, first thing is assume they have the least amount of interest possible in the item. If they're asking you about what your hobbies are, which some companies do, they're trying to get a feel for, what do you do in your spare time? Are you doing things that are, stretching you, or you, that kind of stuff. We all like to talk about our hobbies, but don't spend 30 minutes talking about your hobbies. They're not that interested in them. They really, want to, yeah, that is. An impression is important to make, but it's possible to make both good and bad impressions when talking to somebody. That is the truth. And that's why at the end, you want to end with the most positive impression, because people remember the last one the most. But you're completely right. You can make both at the same time. So always when you're answering the questions, start with the least. If they say, I don't know, what's your hobbies? What do you like to do when you're not working? You don't have to get into detail. You just say, for instance, I like hiking. So my answer is I like hiking in the Colorado Rockies. And if they want to know more, they'll ask for more. But generally, that's all they want to know. They just want a little kind of top level view. Another thing is they don't need to get it like you do. So in other words, just because your understanding of something is at a particular level doesn't mean that they want to know it that deep. Often they're asking not for all the details. They're not looking for you to train them on it. They're just looking to see if you know the right words for, that area. If we were talking about, databases, I'm just going to use database as an example because that's my specialty. They ask you about what's the difference between a relational, database and a analytical database. They don't want all the details of what it is. What they really want to know is, a relational database is designed for, short transactions and primarily writing. An analytical database is designed for very long queries and primarily reading. That's it. That's all you got to say. Chances are, 1,000 things more about it, but always start out with the least amount. Just give them the high level overview. And I like to say, first off, think about when you were starting out. If somebody told you all the details you know now when you first started in whichever tech it is that you learned, how much sense would it have made to you? And the answer is probably not much. It took you a while to learn all the pieces for it to make sense. So don't overwhelm them with all your knowledge, because that's not what they want. That's actually going to turn them off. At Google, one of the things they look for in interviews is that you can answer concisely. Now, I do think it's discriminatory, but nonetheless, it is the, one of the areas that they judge you in. So you don't want to go on and on. And I like to say, just would a 10-year-old get it? If you're explaining it beyond the level of what a 10-year-old would get, you're probably telling them too much to start with. And then the last one is, limit, no brain dumps. You want to talk about, in sound bites, short so they remember them. The whole world now is all into clickbait and sound bites and those kind of things. So just think about it that way. What would make a good clickbait answer for whatever they asked about? Because that's all you're trying to do is have them get their attention and say, oh, yeah, that interests me. Yeah, well, that was an interesting answer. I like that. So don't brain dump on them, because they don't want to hear for 20 minutes about, whatever your special interest is. So save that for, another time. Then stories. This is your real trick to getting in through interviews. We all know that there's going to be a certain number of questions that are asked. And the questions, we can go look them up on Google them, all those kind of things. There'll be some that are related to the specific technologies. Those you're going to depend upon your certifications and training to be able to answer those. But there's going to be a huge amount that are just standard questions, things such as, tell me about a time that you, had a dispute with a coworker and how did you handle it? It's a standard question. I tell you, 50% or more of the interviews, you're going to get asked that question. And it doesn't have to be a coworker. I mean, if you haven't had the experience as a coworker, it could be, I had a person that I worked with in school on a project, and we had a dispute, and how did you solve it? Which we'll talk about how to form the story. I think it's the next slide. So the real trick is we want to tell it in a story format because people remember stories and they relate to stories. So what does a story format really look like? So here's the format for giving a story. Is first off, pick something that was actually real but tangible. But the first thing that you want to do is pick something tangible. So already have come up with the scenarios for the different questions that we know are going to get asked or that we know are highly likely to be asked. Because you have to point to something for real that you actually did. Then you want to give your involvement in that in the way that they would talk about it, not necessarily the way you would talk about it. So again, when you're giving a story, it's like making a movie. It's got to relate to the audience. It doesn't have to be something that the director loves. It's got to be something the audience loves. So remember who your audience is, and you may need to change that a little bit depending. If you're talking to a hiring manager that's technical, you would put a few more technical words in there. But if you're talking to the HR person who's really just vetting you for your, overall, skills and ability to fit into the company, they don't want technical words. They are into touchy-feely kind of words. So use the appropriate words for the audience that you're talking to. Then what you do is you tell them what you learned or liked. Whatever the scenario was, I did whatever to try and solve it. What I learned out of that, or, what I liked from doing that was whatever. And then you summarize the benefits of the experience and what that taught me or what I learned from that was. So we can say, I'll just give you a quick one. I'll make it up on the fly here. If the question is, tell me about a time you had a dispute with a coworker. Well, there was this time I was working with a coworker and we were the two people on the project together and we disagreed on the approach we should take to solve the problem. And we discussed it a number of times, but we could not come to an agreement on it. So I went to my manager and I asked if my manager would come sit in on the discussion and help us work through it so we could reach a decision and start moving forward. What I learned from that was using the resources that I have, such as my manager, allowed me to solve a problem that on my own I was struggling to get solved. And the benefit of that is I now know not to just depend on my own skills, but to take and leverage the skills of those people that are available to me. Does that sound like a great answer for, why you had a dispute? It's not only how you solved it, but it's what you learned from it too. So you're showing them that you actually learn from these experiences. They're not just experiences that you go, oh shit, that one sucked. But what's next? Learning is from them is very important, and they want to hear that you did learn from these things. Then they'll say this person can easily, move along and grow with us. So how do you handle the part about, explaining it at kind of like the 2-year or the 10-year-old level? I have a rule, and my rule is the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule is never talk longer than 2 minutes without stopping and saying, did that answer your question? Or do you want to know more? And there's a number of advantages to this. First off, you usually probably already answered the question in 2 minutes. A lot of people say 2 minutes, that's not long enough to answer it. Most people speak at between 120 to 140 words a minute. So 2 minutes is somewhere around, 250, 260 words. And if you put that on a piece of paper, it's about 2/3 of a page of paper typed out. So 2/3 of a piece of paper typed out is a fairly long answer to give somebody. So the point with the 2-minute rule is, first off, you're being sensitive to the time. If you take 10 minutes to answer a question and you have a 1-hour interview, you're going to answer 6 questions. Do you want your job, career, hopes pinned on 6 questions? Or if you do them in 2 minutes each, you're going to get asked 30 questions. Would you rather have 30 questions that they have a much more rounded understanding of you? So that's one advantage of the 2-minute rule. Other advantage of the 2-minute rule is it keeps you from doing brain dumping that we like to do, because you know that you can only say 2 minutes worth, and at 2 minutes, you got to sound like you're finished. So in other words, when you explain it in the 2 minutes, you're just giving that top level of information. It's that 10-year-old level of information. But now when you stop and ask, if they already have enough, they're going to say, wow, this person's got great, emotional sensitivity and emotional intelligence, because, you stopped and asked them if that was enough for them. And even better, if you didn't hit on the right points, they're going to tell you exactly, no, that didn't quite cover it. What I really want to know about is, and then they're going to tell you specifically what they want you to answer about. So that's the real, goal out of this question is, first off, don't bore them and waste their time if they've already been convinced by the answer you gave them. So give them that chance to say, nope, that was enough. Let's move on to the next question. Or if you didn't hit what they wanted, how much better than having them tell you explicitly, no, this is actually what I want to know about. Now you know exactly what to answer. And again, keep that answer to 2 minutes and do the same routine. And you don't have to, use the exact words of, did that answer your question, or do you need to know more? You could, phrase that all different ways of, is that, does that cover it well enough? Or are there other areas you'd want to know about? That's another way you could say it. So, just get a few ways you can say it so you're not always repeating the exact same line every time. But the big point is stop, verify with them whether you've answered the question as sufficiently for their needs or not. And if not, they're going to tell you exactly what their needs are. So now it's easy to win the question because you're not guessing what they want to know anymore. I'm having the executive function issue of trying to read the messages and answer the other one. It's really go back to the story method, which is tell them a specific, experience or instance, what's your experience with XYZ product, depending where what you got certified in, pick a product that's in that certification. What's your experience in that? Well, my experience is I have done XYZ with it. And when I did that, what I learned out of it was this product was pretty amazing, but there were a few areas that I would like to dig in deeper. And what the advantage of that came out of all that stuff is I found out that just learning it initially is not the same as having worked with it a lot of years. And like all of us, I have now understand that experience is going to help me grow and become, stronger in these technologies, even though I do understand how to get going with them. I don't know, that took probably 45 seconds. That's my guess. So you can see 2 minutes is really a lot of time to give a pretty good answer. But the trick is you got to make sure at the end you kind of wrap it up with what came out of it that's going to help the company is really what you're trying to get down to. What came out of it is you recognize that self-learning is super important in the IT industry. It is. Bottom line is if you can't learn it on your own in the IT industry, you're going to struggle in the IT industry because very often you're just told, here's XYZ product, go learn it and get onto it. So, you express it that way. Does that help? Yeah. Yeah, but, Susan's completely right on the elevator pitch concept. And you don't have to use all 2 minutes. I mean, the idea of the 2-minute rule is do not exceed 2 minutes, because at that point you're starting to bore them. And you're taking away from the questions you can be asked. But if you, so Yes, I would say that the way I would approach it is getting down an elevator pitch is important because there's going to be lots of scenarios that are not in the interview. It might be you're networking and you meet somebody at some, event. You're doing, I used to go to the user group events quite a bit when I was starting in my career. The elevator pitch, that's what you give them at that point because, that's all they really want to know. And what you can do when you're in the interview is you give them the elevator pitch first, and then you just ask them, is that cover enough about me or do you want to know more? Right? If you want to know more, good. Use the other minute and a half and, explain in more detail. Or if they say, nope, that's plenty, good. Move on to the next question. So, the idea of having that elevator pitch worked out and you can deliver it like you're not memorized, but you can deliver it like it's, real to you. Very important. So I'm not taking anything away. She's giving you the correct thing. Concise, tight, get it down. I'm just saying that at the end, just say, hey, did that cover what you want or did you want to know a little more about me? And who knows? Some might say, I want to know some more. And other ones will say, nope, that was plenty. And they'll move on to their next question. That's probably the best approach I would use for the question of tell us about you, which in about 99% of interviews, you're going to get asked, tell us about you. So why not have the elevator pitch and ask them, does that cover it? They say, no, you already know what you're going to go into a little deeper to fill up another minute and a half or up to a minute and a half. And, finish that part out. That way you've answered their questions. The next thing I want to talk about here is recruiters. And there's a lot of people who don't like recruiters. I never quite understood why in the tech industry they don't like recruiters. Their number one complaint about them is because they just badger me to death about, jobs. Well, isn't that a good problem to have? That you're getting, I don't know, I probably get 20 recruiter emails a day. I'm not looking for a job, but hey, it's always nice to see what's out there and know that there's people looking for the skills you have. So that's really the only negative of using a recruiter is, you're going to get emails from recruiters for jobs that may or may not fit you, but hey, that's better than not having anybody, saying we'd like to look at your resume and see if you're a fit for a job. So I always say never go job hunting without one. And I also say get a professional. It's a good type of spam to get. Perfect. You're right. Get a professional. And when I say by professional, there are really I put them in two classes of recruiters. There's the big national recruiters, which are really nothing but smile and dial groups. I mean, they are told they're going to make a fortune being recruiters. They're just banging away on the phone. They're keyword searching off of, LinkedIn and all the job boards. And they'll send, if they see the keyword, my wife was in telecom, for instance, and she's constantly getting things that have absolutely nothing to do with telecom because they saw a keyword in there that she was a business analyst in telecom at one point. But they just see the keyword business analyst and that's it. And then she suddenly has all kinds of, project manager. We got this project manager role. No, she's not a project manager. That's not what she does. So when I say, that's the type you don't want, the big national chains. What you'll find, though, is in virtually any city, you'll find there's smaller recruiters. And I like to say you can recognize a smaller recruiter if you go and walk in their office. The owner or owners, most of the time, there'll be one of them there. And they take more interest in you. They tend to build more of a relationship with you so that they understand what it is that's a fit. And where a recruiter can come in handy is maybe your resume doesn't emphasize or look quite as well as the company thinks they want. But the recruiter who already has a connection can say, hey, would you take a look at this resume? I think this person might be a fit for you. That's the good advantage of having these small boutique, type recruiters is they'll help sell you, which is a good deal. I mean, that's, great help. If they can get you in the interview because they were able to make a phone call, hey, it's good for them. It's good for you. Everybody wins. The only disadvantage with using a recruiter is some companies don't use them. Some companies will not take in, people through recruiters. So just be aware. And on those, you have to go through the normal application, process. And I also say in recruiters, don't stick with just one. Have a bunch of them. There's nothing wrong with having multiple recruiters. They all have different contacts. They all work with different companies. So, what the heck? Why not work with 3 or 4 recruiters? Doesn't hurt any, It's not like they spend a lot of time, waste your time. They usually want to meet with you once so they can get to understand you. And after that, it's emails or phone calls. That's it. So recruiters, I highly, highly, highly recommend recruiters. So building your career. So here's now kind of my take on how would you go about, getting your first position, and as it says at the bottom, your first position is always a start. I had one gentleman that was transition out of college, had a degree in computer science, had very, very good grades. He was a desirable candidate. He was definitely autistic. It was fairly apparent if if you're autistic yourself or about it, you'd recognize he's probably autistic. It showed. But he decided that he wanted to work for Microsoft. And he applied to Microsoft, he said 100 times. I don't know, maybe I don't believe 100, but, way more, 20 times maybe he applied. He applied to, a ton. And he didn't apply anywhere else either. That's it. If Microsoft wasn't going to hire him, he wasn't interested in a job. Well, your first position is a start. Yes, there are some people who do get hired by Google straight out of college. But it ain't very many. And they all have, super advanced degrees and from very, very, high-end, well-known colleges, MIT, Caltech, Stanford, those kind of places. But that's not normal. That's like, a fraction of a percent. So instead, you've got to work your way up the ladder. So just remember, first position is just where you're starting. It's not where you want to end up. I never thought I'd work for Google. My first position was actually working in a PC shop, putting together white box PCs back in the mid 90s. That's pretty low end, but on the other hand, it got stuff on my resume. So certifications, that's your foot in the door. That's what gives you the credibility that you actually have some skills is you've got a certification. Cool. You got the start. That's a great place to start. But next, recruiters. We already talked about recruiters. They're a free critical resource. Why not have somebody who's in the job, who has a job of finding jobs is probably going to be more efficient at it than you will be all by yourself. Doesn't mean don't try yourself some too, but definitely, use a recruiter. Temping. Some people call it contracting. It is one of the best ways to build your resume. This is where one of those things where, we're looking for a person that's a, network engineer and we need them for 6 months. Hey, what's wrong with having 6 months of experience on your resume of actually doing what you're certified in? That's going to really, make you more wanted by more employers. Can give you access to that, but sometimes you might have to start a little bit lower down on the scale, and that might be the second or third job that gets up into those ranges. So I'm just saying, just be aware that your first position is a start, so the important part is to build your resume because that's what's going to get you into those higher end and more desirable companies. So I did temping, or I called it contracting, as a lot of people will call it, for probably 12 years. So temping is not just like a temporary job. It's real easy to go from one to the next, to the next, to the next, and you're employed all the time. And you get experience because you're in all different companies doing all different types of business. So you learn a lot more about the businesses, which makes you much more knowledgeable, which makes you more valuable to your next employer. So don't discount it. It's an amazing way to get started. And in general, they're more willing in a temp to take some, a little more risk in somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience built up than they are in a full-time hire. So it's easier to get into a lot of temping positions, where you might have more struggle getting into a permanent full-time position. So don't discount them. It's a great way to go. I had a wonderful career doing it. And I made, I would say, double the number you have down there is what I made temping a year. So it's not that you're going to, it's going to be cheap either. If you're good, you can get a lot of money being a temp. They got a problem. They need to solve it. If you can solve the problem, they're willing to pay. That's about the way it works. So don't forget that. I think that's don't discount it and don't throw it out. That is definitely a realistic thing to consider. Next thing is open source. Let your repo shine. If you are doing things that you can get a GitHub repo and put some things in the GitHub repo around stuff you've done, companies look at that kind of stuff. And that can give you a boost because you've actually done some work and, shown some things that you have written, coded, whatever, in the area that you're doing. So maybe it's the scripts for an automated build. Maybe it's, scripts for setting up a Kubernetes cluster, whatever it is. I mean, just put it out there on a repo so employers can take a look and say, geez, he's not just got a certification, but look, he actually has done some work. And the next thing is networking. And when I say networking, that means networking with professionals, not networking with your buddies. It's great to network with your buddies, but, they're poor and broke, just like, my buddies are all poor and broke too. They're not a great source to get an amazing job. Nice people. I mean, don't get me wrong. They're nice people, but, they're not going to help me in my career particularly. I always like to say you really want to network 2 levels above yourself. If you're not networking with somebody that you're almost scared to go talk to, you're not networking high enough. Because those are the people that have influence. And if they, like you, they, may recommend you for a job. And LinkedIn is a wonderful place to start building those connections. Use LinkedIn, get connected to people that are in those appropriate fields. Yes, that's exactly it. No more people that could also hire you, which is why you go up 2 levels, because the people at your level can't hire you. It's the people above them that can hire you. So that's definitely extremely true, Taylor. Then entry-level position is all about getting experience. It's not about prestige. So in other words, if the entry-level position is for the hardware store down the street and it's using the skills that you're trained in, great. It's going to get you experience on your resume to get you prepared for that next step to move up to companies that, you like better or just nicer companies to work for. And then the last thing is you do all those things and you give it some time and keep working at it, and you'll eventually end up with your dream job. So that is my, stairway to success. And I think you can see there's probably some things in there that are a little different than you might have heard from other people or other approaches. But I found this to be amazingly effective and, like I say, worked well to get me all the way to Google. Took me 20 years to get to Google, but hey, I'm here now. So what the heck? Zavicon. So I'm going to tell you now about a particular recruiter.